Polar bears have become this kind of sad mascot for climate change, and that's super problematic because we're so disconnected from their experience.
Hello, welcome to another round of Real Estate Talk with the UW's Runstead Department of Real Estate, engaging the built environments around us. Today we'll have Nicole DeNamur. Nicole is a sustainability leader who cares deeply about creating collaborative spaces and uniting diverse groups to drive meaningful change at scale. She has been a UW affiliate instructor and developed and taught a course called Risk and Reward in Sustainable Development. She has also started a company called Sustainable Strategies to help companies identify and manage risk. Hello, Nicole. How are you doing today? And thanks for coming on.
Hi, Jeff. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about your background. How did you connect with the UW Real Estate Department?
Yeah, so that's kind of a interesting and bit longer question. But so going back a little bit, I'm an attorney. And so I've been practicing construction law for a couple years. And kind of early in my career in construction litigation, I saw this opportunity to advocate for sustainable building design and construction when this was all relatively new, at least to the legal community. You know, sustainable design had been around for a little bit, but it was kind of still new to the legal community. And some voices in that space were kind of focused on the risks of sustainable building. And in terms like litigation were thrown around. I don't know if you've heard this term, but so there's really a focus on risk. And as an environmentalist, I really wanted to kind of counter those voices and that kind of theme, I guess. And so I started kind of exploring sustainability and sustainable design and reaching out to the community here in Seattle. And I really thought, and I still believe, that collaboration is the way to really move the needle on sustainable building and sustainable design really at scale, right? Which is what we need with respect to climate change. And so when I was thinking, how do I work in this space and how do I kind of create the change that I think is important, collaboration was the theme that kept coming up. So I thought, I want to teach in this space. And I think that, you know, educating grad students who are future practitioners who are going to be working on these really hard issues like climate change is probably the best way that I can help be a positive voice in this space and kind of counter these themes of risk and say, how do we work together, reframe risk, and really create the change that we need? And so I had never taught a graduate level class. I joke that I developed and taught a graduate level class with no teaching experience because I had a lot of support and a lot of experience as well. And so I put together a syllabus and connected with actually the dean at the law school at the time, because as an attorney, I had some connections there. And she introduced me to some of the leadership at the College of Built Environment, as well as the real estate department, and worked with leadership there and said, you know, hey, I think this is important, and it's important to kind of take a leadership role in this space, and that the real way to make a difference is, like I said, creating these and fostering these collaborative spaces where industries that don't normally work together can work together. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to be in the College of Built Environment and in the real estate department, because I didn't want to be a lawyer in the law school, kind of perpetuating that tower kind of situation that I think doesn't foster the collaboration that we need. So I approached the leadership at Runstead and with kind of my first draft of the syllabus, and they helped me, you know, understand some of the different aspects that needed to be incorporated, how it needed to be refined, how I needed to gain additional experience, and did that for a couple of years, a couple of rounds, and got to a point where we really had a course that was you know, academically robust and had the necessary elements that we needed. And I was off and running. I think it was originally called something else when it started, and we renamed it to Risk and Reward and Sustainable Development. And again, the theme there is really cross-industry collaboration, which, you know, you've heard me speak before, I think is so critical to mitigating things like climate change and really addressing all of the challenges that we're now facing as practitioners like myself and as future practitioners. So it was kind of a little bit of a winding path, but a really good, fun result to be able to work with CBE and to be a part of Runstead. So that was kind of a long answer, but
So if students were to leave your class with one takeaway after you taught it, what would be the one takeaway you want them to go with?
I think to challenge traditional notions of risk. If someone tells you that something is a risk, ask why. Get a better understanding of why that is. I understand that it's a privilege to be an attorney, and I also understand that when I, as an attorney, say things, perhaps they have a certain tone behind them, or people listen to them in a certain way because of that position that I'm in. And so when lawyers say things like, "Oh, that's a risk," I think we need to be really mindful of using terms like that because they can stall much needed innovation, right? And sometimes risks are risks, and we need to take a closer look at them. But I would counter those traditional notions of risk with what's running in the background, which is a rapidly changing climate, which is kind of a very unpredictable future, particularly right now. And so what I would want people to take away from my class is if somebody tells you something is a risk or you think it's a risk, to really challenge those traditional notions and frameworks in light of kind of the overall greater context that we're seeing, because we need really deep, innovative change at scale and like now.
Great. So you've also created a company called Sustainable Strategies. Help us to understand what they do and who'd be a good fit to look into it.
Yeah, so a lot of what I've just talked about is what gave me the inspiration, I guess, to transition from a legal career over to sustainability consulting. So work with all the building design, construction, and development disciplines to kind of do all the things that I just talked about, really push sustainable building design, construction, and operations at scale, help all of those various disciplines really get an understanding of risk, interface with regulators, interface with policy folks, interface with across industries, like I just talked about. So we have the lawyers, as both a lawyer and a sustainability professional. I think one of the things that I really bring to the table is the ability to talk to both the legal community and talk to both the design community, talk to the development community, kind of have that challenge to be able to speak the different languages and look at things through maybe a little bit of a different lens. So we work with all kinds of different entities and companies. Kind of the tagline that I developed is kind of a specialized support for deep green goals. And so kind of provide that kind of legal and risk management lens to sustainability issues. We work with a broad variety of folks. Part of what we also do is training and education, because as we just talked about, it's something I have a lot of experience in. And I also think it's a very underappreciated form of risk management, often not taking a look at where there may be potential knowledge gaps is really what exposes folks to risk. So challenge people to kind of think through what are some educational opportunities that could help, for example, construction teams make sure that the sustainable design is actually realized at the end. Maybe there's a knowledge gap or an educational opportunity there that could help achieve that goal. And that's a reasonable, pretty low cost risk management strategy. So we also, in addition to sustainability consulting, traditional services, we also provide training and education on a variety of aspects related to sustainability. Often have a focus on health and wellness. I'm a Well AP and a FitWell ambassador as well. So lots of
Yeah, that's
things.
very valuable. Great. So changing gears, what keeps you up at night?
Lots of things. I think what keeps me up at night is the impact of our collective short-sightedness. What I mean by that is, our world is a beautiful and amazing place, yet we know so little about it, right? And we approach it often with arrogance. And I'm talking about, us as folks in the building, design, construction, operations kind of industry. And so one example I give, one of my random claims to fame, is that I studied at Biosphere 2 when I was an undergrad. If you're familiar with Biosphere 2, it was the bubble in the desert. It was this kind of experiment, I guess, to kind of recreate some of the major biomes on Earth on a about 3-acre scale in the middle of the desert. It was used as a teaching facility when I was an undergrad, and I got to study there. And I was asked to write about it for Arcade magazine a couple of years ago. And the title of that article was "Recognizing Our Environmental Arrogance." It was talking about how we know so little about our world that we couldn't really even recreate parts of it on like a 3-acre scale. The project was seen as a failure by a lot of people. You can question whether or not it's a failure, but my position was and is that it was a success because it taught us how little we know about our world. So that short-sightedness when we're making policy decisions, when we're calling something a risk and choosing not to build sustainably or try something new or take a reasonable approach to that risk, that short-sightedness, it keeps me up at night because we have no idea what the implications of that are. And we have no idea what the implications are of those kinds of decisions. And we're approaching them many times from this kind of place of arrogance that I think we need to be a little bit more mindful and humble about how we approach those things.
Okay, thank you. So, do you have a favorite book you could recommend, or what are you reading now?
You know, I do, and I would like to say that it was something really nerdy and technical, but I do a lot of that reading. But instead, I thought I would share maybe just two instead of one really quickly. So I have two favorite books that kind of inspire me. So I do a lot of technical reading, like a lot of professionals. But two books that I go back to when I need to have those creative kind of inspiring moments are, one of them is this book, which is huge, Case Study Houses, which was a gift and I treasure it. And if you're familiar with this program, it was kind of a interesting look at early kind of aspects of affordable housing and prefab construction. And so it was an interesting project that was done kind of in the mid-century, and a lot of interesting designers were a part of that. So I treasured this book. And then also this one, which is called Altered Landscapes. And it's basically a picture book with some explanation, but it shows, as you can see on the cover here, and this is a wolf howling at a streetlight. And so it shows how we've altered our world in permanent and semi-permanent ways, and kind of gives you a look at things like strip mining and forestry practices and development and projects. And whenever I need kind of this moment of like, why do we do this work and why is it important, and how can I take a step back and be a little bit more mindful or careful about the decisions that we make and how they are oftentimes permanent. Both these books kind of help me, I guess, reframe that lens and kind of use a different part of my brain than I
Well,
usually
thank
do.
you for sharing. And so finally, if people wish to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, so feel free to reach out by email. I'm sure we can leave that in text somewhere, but it's my first name, Nicole, Nicole, at sustainablestrategiespllc.com. And then obviously our website is also sustainablestrategiespllc.com. And you can also find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we also have a YouTube channel. So
Well,
lots of ways to connect, and look forward to hearing from folks.
great. We'll put a link on there. And thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.